Hi everybody, it's really nice to see you all here this evening, and thank you so much for showing up and thank you for being part of the Sheffield digital community. So as Chris said, for the first time in 2023 we did a skills audit. So we went out to the community, to the membership, and we said, tell us about your skills need, with a very long and very boring survey. But it did result in a really interesting report. And then from that, we thought, well, you know, that's fine, but what you're really looking for is what are the trends? How do things develop? So we always intended to do the audit again, and we did. We did it again in the autumn of last year. So I'm going to take you through very quickly just some highlights. There will be a full published report which should be available around the end of this month, but just to take you through some of it. So first of all, who responded to our survey? This first slide shows you the size of company by the number of employees. Now I will say that this time, so in 2024, we had fewer respondents than we did in 2023. I think that's partly down to how busy everybody was in the autumn, to the fact that we all have survey fatigue, and also partly to the fact that I'm sure there are things we can do to make our survey less onerous to complete. But that said, it was broadly representative of the community in terms of size of company by employees and also in terms of by their turnover. Now, one of the things I wanted to note is that in 2024, we saw more very small companies responding to the survey, which meant that the results in 2024 are less skewed by larger companies taking part in it. And also, I'm noticing with this slide that we have more companies in the 250,000 to 1 million turnover responding, which I hope means that our companies grew in 2024. That would be a different survey that we would have to do. The other thing I would say is that the majority of the companies who responded were more than 2 years old. So these are established companies, not ones who are in very early startup. So we asked companies, what do you do? And here's your list. The top 3 are exactly the same as the 2023 survey, apart from the fact that SaaS and cloud changed over. So SaaS is now number 2 and cloud is number 3. But I think you'll probably agree that's a fairly good picture of what do people do in the tech community here in Sheffield. The next thing we did was ask them some questions about how they're feeling about the economic climate. And we asked people for the first time, have you had to reduce staff in the past 12 months? And you'll see that over 50% said, yes, we did. And the way that they did that was by delaying recruitment, by not filling vacancies, by taking longer to advertise roles, and also not replacing people who were leaving, and unfortunately through redundancies as well. So then we asked them to look ahead and talk about how confident they were feeling about what's going to happen in the next 12 months. And you might look at that and say, oh, well, you know, that's not too bad. Only 20% said that they expected to reduce staffing or turnover. But then I'd say, look at the bottom of this pie chart and look at the 54% who don't know or think it's hard to say. There's a real feeling of uncertainty, and there's a lack of confidence in terms of predicting what are things going to look like. When I look back at the results from 2023, I could also see that companies back then didn't do a very good job of predicting what might happen in 2024. In 2023, companies said about 20% of them thought that there would be some impact from the economic climate. Actually, when I looked at the 2024 results, that was more like 50%. So again, you can see why people aren't feeling very confident about being able to predict the future. In 2023, we were just coming out of COVID and all of that fun and games. So we asked a question about working patterns. And what this showed was that there'd been a massive shift to hybrid and remote working, which I'm sure doesn't surprise anybody here. So we asked the question again in 2024 to see if that had stuck. And I think the answer is yes. In our industry, hybrid and remote working are here to stay. And there isn't the big shift that you're seeing and hearing reported about in the newspapers about everybody back to the office full time. So I think that's something that we were doing before COVID anyway, but something that we've really dived into and adopted since. The next questions we asked people were about productivity, which is really about your company's ability to grow. And we asked them what sort of challenges were they facing in terms of being able to grow. And the biggest one, the same as it was in 2023, is not being able to access enough experienced talent. And that was the top concern. But what we saw in 2024 is that concerns about the cost of living have moved right up the scale. That was only down at sort of number 4 or 5 in 2023. And I think if we look around and look at what's going on for everybody with inflation and energy prices and all that kind of thing, you can see why the cost of living is a concern. Okay, so that's how people are feeling. Now let's look at their skills. We asked people to gaze into the future and tell us what are the key technical skills that they believe will underpin the future growth of their companies. And number one is developers. Developers is always number one. It was number one in 2023 and everyone expected that. But what we have seen is that this list in 24 is very similar to what we had in 2023. The top 3 are the same, but the next 4, design, DevOps, product and project management, UX research and design, those have all moved up in terms of how important people think they're going to be. And what's moved down, interestingly, is data science, data analysis. But that may have more to do with the sorts of companies that filled in the survey rather than it being an actual reflection of what's going on. And that's something that you always have to keep in mind when you're doing research of this kind. The next thing we did was ask people to tell us about recruitment, vacancies, and what sort of skills they tried to recruit for. So the blue bars in this graph are from 2023, and the red bars are from 2024. So what you can see is that overall, the number of vacancies that people had in the previous 12 months was considerably less than it was in 2023. And we saw that on our jobs board on the Sheffield Digital website as well. I went back and did a quick count, and the number of jobs that were put on the jobs board by our members and partners in 2024 was about half what we saw in 2023. So that tells you everyone kind of stopped and tightened their belts a bit. What sort of roles were people recruiting for? Well, again, this is broadly similar to 2023. Developers at the top. Project management has moved up the list, but otherwise that list is pretty much the same thing. So the same sort of skills are in demand and probably going to continue to be in demand. We also asked about what level of experience were you looking for? And similar to 2023, most of the jobs were for people with experience. Because we said, were you looking for people with experience? Were you looking for entry-level talent? Or were you looking for both? And mostly it was for experienced people. However, of the few roles that were marked at entry level, I was encouraged to see that the range of entry level opportunities is broader. So they were talking about things like project management, UX, UI, business analysis and data analysis, as well as the usual things around software development and digital marketing, which tend to be the ones that are more at an entry level. So how successful were people in filling their vacancies? Pretty successful. Again, red line is 2024, blue line is 23. I think you would say that's a pretty balanced picture. In terms of why people couldn't fill vacancies, again, same as before, not enough suitable candidates. There was an interesting thing that came up in 2024 about lack of interest. which is perhaps people just didn't feel like moving jobs. They kind of hunkered down and stayed where they were, or people perhaps looking from outside the region to coming here were not seeing enough to attract them here. Salary demand continues to be a thing as well, and a lack of specialist skills. I didn't drill down into what specialist skills, but I think then you're talking about probably very specific technology stacks, that kind of thing. Salary inflation is still going on. In 2023, this number was 80%, and 2024, we've now got 83%. Also something that's probably not going to go away anytime soon. So then we asked people about qualifications and the level of qualifications that they look for in candidates. This picture is very similar to 2023. We always ask a question that gives the option of saying, I'm just interested in the person and their attitudes and abilities, and we'll teach them the rest. And everybody always ticks that. So I always get, almost 100% on that, but they still fill in all of this as well. So they say, yeah, we're really interested in people, but it'd be really good if they had a degree or some sort of technical qualification. And I think given the level that the companies in Sheffield operate at and the kinds of cutting edge tech that they're working with, that's not really surprising. So where are people recruiting from? This picture is exactly the same as last time. Social media and advertising and general networking are top of the list, and then referrals, and you can see the rest here. But the same as in 2023, people said that the most effective thing was referrals by current employees. And that says to me that's the power of the network, and that's the power of the community when it comes to finding skills that businesses need. Are people recruiting entry-level talent? It's a fairly mixed picture. It's fairly similar to the previous year. In 2024, fewer people said that they were looking at apprentices, which I think is a shame. I think there's some work to do within companies to help them understand the benefits of apprenticeships more, but there's also work to do on the side of the organisations providing the apprenticeships to explain them better and to support particularly smaller companies in what's involved in taking on an apprentice. We also asked, how satisfied are you with your entry-level talent? And people are pretty happy. They're saying that most people either met their expectations or exceeded their expectations, and that includes recruiting from boot camps, which is encouraging to see because in the past we've had some people feeling less confident in graduates from boot camps. So then we asked people to look ahead to the next 12 months. What skills do they need? Guess what's at the top? Developers. However, beyond that, the list looks slightly different from the way it did the year before. So digital marketing has moved right up the list. Again, this may be down partly to the sorts of companies that filled in the survey. But, and again, as I said, data science has dropped down. But I think there's a real breadth here. And the other thing that I wanted to point out, someone said to me outside earlier, is it all about AI? It's not all about AI. I think, developers and lots of other skills in businesses are also still extremely important. I don't know if AI will ever get to the very top of the list. I expect it'll probably start to hover just below developers pretty soon, though. Okay, so in the final part of the survey, and we did this in 2023 as well, we asked some questions to focus in on diversity and inclusion. And I'm really happy to say that compared to 2023, when I really couldn't report anything, a lot more people filled in the whole of the section on diversity and inclusion, which just makes me feel good because it tells me that companies are starting to pay attention to this. There may have been some self-selection in that the sort of companies that took the time to fill in the survey are the sorts of thoughtful companies that also are thinking about diversity and inclusion, but I'm going to take the win anyway. And it's really encouraging to have something to talk about here. the first thing we asked was gender. And this is a very similar picture. This was the only chart I could put up after 2023. It's still mostly men. Women and non-binary are there. Again, our average is better than the national average, which is encouraging. But you can see that there's still work to do there to get to the sort of 50-50 split that we'd all like to see. For the first time, though, I actually got some statistics about ethnicity. Guess what? Have a look around the room. We're very, very white as an industry. We know we're very white as an industry. The purple slice and the red slice on that graph that aren't labelled are mixed race and also other didn't respond. So I don't have any more to say other than that this points out what we know. And I think we all know that in order to make better products and services, we need to have a much more diverse workforce. I then went on in the survey to ask people questions about differences in ability. And I got some really interesting stuff, although none of it was the sorts of numbers that I could put into a nice chart for you. But I do have some observations. First of all, there was more reporting of neurodiversity, which is really interesting because there's a lot of conversation about our industry and the role that neurodiversity can play and the way that we can be more accessible to people with different than neurotypical approaches. So I thought that was good to highlight for you. People said, we're not making any changes to the way that we recruit to attract diverse talent. And I went, oh dear. But then I read all the extra comments and they told me all the things they were already doing. And I got lots of really interesting ideas and comments on what people were doing to try and attract more diverse talent. I don't have time to go into them this evening, I'm afraid, but they will be in the report. So that's a reason for you to look forward to that. What's stopping them from doing more is resource, so having the time and energy for it, but also knowing how to access diverse talent. And what I want to do at this point is just mention an organisation called Code Your Future. And can I ask, is Liliana here? Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to get you to wave again in a minute. So Code Your Future recently ran a pilot in Sheffield, and they're now looking to get properly established here. And what they do is they specialise in working with displaced people, refugees, and people from low-income backgrounds. And they're different from a boot camp because they work with those people on a program that's typically about a year long. And what they also do is they work very closely with the employers in a region in order to understand what the businesses need and then to match the training of the individuals with the exact skills that the businesses need. Now, I think this is really, really interesting. Sheffield is a city of sanctuary. We must have so many people here who have come here and brought their skills and talents with them, but don't know how to get into the industry, and something like Code Your Future could really help them. So Liliana, please just stand up for a minute so everyone can see you. Here she is from Code Your Future. If you would like to say hello to her afterwards and find out more, please do, and we'll be doing a blog post about Code Your Future and providing links and so on when we get to it, as soon as we can get to it. Okay, so what's next? As I said, the full report will be published by the end of February, because after that I'm going away, so I need to make sure it's done before I go. But I have two questions for you. First of all, is this valuable? And if it is, can you help me find a better way to collect the information? Because I'm very mindful that while it's interesting the way that we do it, and I'm able to tell you some useful stuff, we're not talking to nearly enough businesses, we're not gathering nearly enough information, and for us to be credible, we need to do that, but we need to do it in a way that isn't a huge burden on the businesses to do it. So I'm going to leave those 2 questions with you. Please get in touch with me and let me know how we can do this better. I'm on Slack, mel@sheffield.digital. You can always find me. And lastly, thank you very much indeed for listening to me, but also to the companies who did fill in the questionnaire. I'm extremely grateful. Thanks.